A few showers, a few thunderstorms, a fairly strong thunderstorm. May have wind gusts up to 40 miles an hour and some small hail on the north side of Arab, tracking east-southeast. This should be it for the rest of the day for you in Arab, but expect some heavy rain here in about over the next 15 to 20 minutes. More on your forecast is coming up. It's going to be a beautiful weekend. It is 4 o'clock. The news starts now.
WAFF 48, your first alert station. You're watching WAFF 48 News now.
We start with the WAFF 48 News first alert on Governor Bentley. Today, the governor responded to the request made by State Auditor Jim Ziegler. We first told you yesterday that Ziegler ordered the governor to testify under oath about allegations he misused taxpayer money. Bentley is accused of using state money to facilitate an extramarital affair with his former aide, Rebecca Mason. Ziegler says he just wants to clear the air. Bentley released a statement today saying, quote, the appropriate legal process is through the Alabama Ethics Commission, where the auditor has already filed a complaint. We are fully cooperating in every way. I do not intend to respond further to Mr. Ziegler. Ziegler says a portion of Alabama law allows the auditor to place state officials under oath if it's related to an account he audits. New details today in the case against a woman accused of killing her husband.
The case is now headed to a grand jury. Tammy Keel appeared for a preliminary hearing in Jackson County this morning. She's charged with murder for the death of her husband, John Ricky Keel. It happened after a domestic dispute at their home last month in Woodville. Investigators say Tammy shot her husband, then tried to set him on fire. WFF 48 Stephen McLam was in the courtroom during this morning's hearing. He'll have more on the story coming up on WFF 48 News at 5.
New at 4, a sad story tonight. A 5-year-old boy is killed in a 2-vehicle wreck. That crash happened on Huntsville-Browns Ferry Road in Limestone County last night. It's about 5 miles east of Athens. Troopers say 2 cars collided head-on, killing 5-year-old Eli Cameron Beck. The driver of the car Beck was riding in was hurt. Troopers are investigating the cause.
Oh, the cold front's finally moving through. It's not a strong cold front, but it's going to bring us some nice weather and drier air and, in fact, cooler mornings coming over the next 48 hours. But our first alert million-watt radar showing 1 band of showers here in northern Jackson County. Another thunderstorm there as you get down closer in towards Arab right now, and that's going to move into town and produce some very heavy rain. Here's a closer view with another view from our live storm tracker Doppler radar. A little bit of hail here possible, some dark clouds. Probably going to get some good pictures of this too as it starts to move in. Let's take a look at your forecast for the drive home this evening. We're looking at some clouds and isolated shower storm. Temperatures remain in the 70s. Your weekend forecast coming up.
Now to a tragic story in Ohio. We've just learned 4 small children survived a mass shooting in Ohio where 8 people were killed. Among the survivors, a 4-day-old baby. Authorities also believe the killer is still at large and should be considered armed and dangerous. Several law enforcement agencies are helping with the investigation in Pike County. All of the victims appear to have been killed execution style in a rural area of southern Ohio. A pastor says one of the victims and her children used to attend his church.
Very out of character for our community, but with the ways of the world and the way things is going, I guess maybe we shouldn't be surprised, but we are. This is so tragic, so tragic. All
nearby schools were on a precautionary lockdown. Look for updates on this developing story on air and online at WAFF.com.
New information today on the death of pop superstar Prince. The sheriff's office in Minneapolis held a news conference just a few minutes ago. Authorities say there were no signs of trauma on his body, and they do not suspect suicide. An autopsy was completed this morning, but the preliminary findings have not been released. Meantime, fans are gathered outside Paisley Park, where Prince died. Jay Gray has more.
Fans and flowers, balloons and banners line the fence outside of Paisley Park. Thousands drawn here to remember and honor Prince, a pop star and cultural icon whose music was the soundtrack for a generation.
It's overwhelming. I mean, I'm still numb about the whole thing.
As fans around the world deal with their shock and sadness for the first time today, investigators shared details about events the morning of his death.
Staff members from Paisley Park had been unable to contact Prince yesterday morning and went to check on him. They found him unresponsive and called 911.
An autopsy was performed today. The medical examiner says results won't be available for several weeks. But we do now know when paramedics were called to Paisley Park yesterday, it was the second time in less than a week that friends or colleagues found Prince unresponsive. The first coming after what was his final concert in Atlanta, when his private jet on the trip back to Minnesota made an emergency landing and he was rushed to an Illinois hospital.
The thing that really bothers me about it is the Prince I know was like super healthy, vegan, wasn't an abuser of drugs, wasn't an abuser of alcohol. He lived right.
A tribute to that life splashed in his signature purple on bridges and buildings across the country.
It's so surreal. I think he's gone.
Leaving behind a legacy that echoes around the world.
And more evidence of that lasting legacy, the top 19 downloads on iTunes today, all songs performed by Prince. Jay Gray, NBC News, outside of Paisley Park.
Birmingham will pay tribute to Prince by lighting up City Hall and surrounding buildings in purple. City officials say the lighting will start tonight and continue for the rest of April. Mayor William Bill says this is their way to pay tribute and thank Prince for touching many lives.
All new at 4, some very scary statistics about one of the country's biggest killers. Suicide rates soar in the U.S. They're up 24% and the largest increase among women. Kristen Dahlgren is digging into the disturbing trend. Kristen, any explanation as to why women and particularly young ladies are committing suicide?
Well, Kim, it's the question everybody's asking now. This particular analysis just looks at the data, but it has a lot of suicide researchers looking at it today, trying to come up with some answers. And so I spoke with one researcher from Columbia University, and she said when it comes to the younger girls from 10 to 14, we saw a threefold increase. It's a little bit easier there to predict maybe what could have weighed in to those decisions. With girls, you see a lot more social media these days, a lot more cyberbullying, things like that, a lot more pressure on these young girls. Also, she said that girls are reaching puberty sooner, and that's a trend that we've been seeing over the years due to environmental factors, perhaps the obesity epidemic playing into it. And when you reach puberty, you also mature enough for some of the psychological disorders, which is always a key in a suicide. And so that could perhaps be weighing in. When you look at the other group that saw a dramatic increase, middle-aged women, it's a little bit more difficult to predict what's going on there. She thought perhaps it was the lack of access to mental health care. Perhaps some of those women underemployed, not able to get the good mental health care, and that's what's really needed in a lot of these cases.
Well, Kristen, Alabama's suicide rate traditionally higher than the national average, and you spoke with a Columbia University professor. What are some warning signs, and what can we do to help a loved one before it's too late?
Yeah, and this is so important, something that all of us can be looking out for, no matter where you live. There are warning signs, things like depression, somebody may be sleeping more or less than they used to, anxiety, mood changes, things like that. Somebody talking about suicide or talking about their despair and how they don't want to live anymore. Pay attention to those. A lot of times you may think that it's somebody just talking, and there may be something behind it. And so researchers say we really need to pay attention, help that person to get help, make sure they know they are not alone in this. And that could be the key ultimately to turning this trend around.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kristen. Of course, we'll be looking forward to more of your report on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
The man accused of going on a deadly shooting spree in Michigan will stand trial. We'll tell you about today's court hearing coming up.
And there are 5 days left in this legislative session, and lawmakers still need to tackle the prison bill. We'll have the latest from Montgomery in a live report.
And sunny and warm temperatures are expected across the valley this weekend. Brad will have an update on our forecast next.